and just got the go-ahead from Geraldine, so I get to go now. It's moving to see you. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Laura, thank you for your poem about losing time, especially in the summer. The symbol that I worked on this week was the idea of losing time, mainly in the winter. So I really appreciate how that is happening. Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. The title of this morning's reflection is Sneaking into the Promised Land, attempt number 2. And here the number 2 is symbolic. It does not literally mean 2. It means that in life we have to try things more than once. The reflection is inspired by the feeling of being frozen in time. It's the feeling of being completely encased in ice for years and years and years. It's akin to the story of the prodigal son who leaves home with a portion of his father's fortune, squanders it irresponsibly, becomes destitute in short order, and returns home disgraced, wondering how or even if he will receive his family's welcome. Musically, we sing, "Would you even know me since I've been away? I wake with my eyes closed and sleep through the day, but I'll open my heart and I'll learn how to pray if, Mama, you let me come home. But what mother is this?" The prodigal son returns home not to his mother, but to his estranged father and to his brother. He freely admits his transgressions. He says, "I broke into Eden in the hours before dawn. I've stolen the apples that dropped on your lawn. My spirit, my pride, and my innocence gone. Please, Mama, let me come home." It is this idea of breaking into Eden that is so much fun for me to think about. The idea that we could sneak back into the promised land as if we were away at the disco party too long after our curfew, and our parents are home, wide awake and waiting, angry but with open arms. This idea fascinates me. It buoys me when life lays my spirit low. To all souls, I say good morning. It is good to be together. 3 days ago and 3 nights, I could not lift my weary head from the great soft pillow of my sorrow. There I slept in my dream, and I could not let the good light in. It's a true story. I was in darkness, closed, sealed, stowed tightly away, tucked in, held off, secluded. Joy was so nearby, but somehow it eluded me. It slipped right through my grasp. I could not hold on to it. Joy was like water, like wishes, like a white-tailed deer, nearly impossible to catch. Still, I found myself being faithful, surprisingly, and this lifted up my spirits, but it did not change my mood. Sorrow takes its time with me, takes its time with us. We don't always have to rush it, though. Sometimes it has a gift. Sometimes we can just let go and let God, as they say. We can just let sorrow do its work. Marianne Williamson, the woman who, the spiritual leader and the woman who ran for president recently, tells a story about a woman who tried to rush through sorrow. She avoided sorrow by shopping, actually. She called it sale tag therapy. Whenever she was feeling blue, she would rush out and buy herself something to make herself feel a little better. It's a good idea, but it's not the right gesture. If you step away from commerce, it becomes healthier. When we're feeling blue, it's a good idea to perform some ritual, to exercise our bodies and exorcise our demons. It's a good idea to exercise our body and our minds, to physically move about, to play, to socialize, and also to be at peace within oneself, to be quiet and reflective. And it's a good idea to exercise the body and the mind in order to exorcise our demons, in order to dislodge, expel, cast out, or drive away the demons that cause us suffering. Now, when I talk about demons and exorcism, I'm not talking about a creepy horror show. The demons that I hope to dislodge, expel, cast out, drive away are those of judgment and self-judgment, of insecurity and rejection, of loss and of loneliness, the demons of suffering. Within me, all of these add up to sorrow, and by sorrow, I can be paralyzed, I can get stuck, and I can be frozen. I came across a song the other day, a song by James Taylor called The Frozen Man. It's about getting stuck and effectively being paralyzed. James Taylor sings, "The last thing I remember is the freezing cold water reaching up just to swallow me whole. There was ice in the rigging and a howling wind and a shock to my body as we tumbled in. Oh, merciful God. My brothers and the others were lost at sea. I alone am returned to tell thee. Hidden in ice for a century to walk the world again. Lord, have mercy on the frozen man." After a century in the ice, the frozen man came back to life. This is a beautiful song, and my favorite verse is the second one, continuing the story. "The next words that were spoken to me," James Taylor sings, "the nurse asked me what my name might be. Now she was all in white at the foot of my bed. And I said, 'Angel of mercy, am I alive or am I dead?' And then I said, 'My name is William James McPhee. I was born in 1843, raised in Liverpool by the sea, but that's not who I am.'" And I believe it, frozen William was right. We are more than our biographies. We are more than the details of our lives, no matter how challenging our lives become. In the first verse, there was a biblical reference. Did anybody catch it? Spoiler alert, this is not a quiz. It's not a test. There is no danger, no jeopardy here. No hellish booby prize awaits us if we don't answer the question correctly. I was just wondering, did anybody catch the reference? I'm glad to tell you, and I admit that when I hear these questions, I'm terrible at these questions. The biblical reference came in the James Taylor line when he said, "I alone am returned to tell thee." This line alludes to the book of Job. It occurs 4 times in the first chapter. In Job chapter 1, verses 13 and 15, we learn that on the day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them when a rival group of southern Arabians fell upon them and carried them off, killed the servants with the edge of a sword, and I alone escaped to tell you," the first messenger said. And according to the story, Job had been deprived of many of his servants and some of his possessions. And following this, in Job chapter 1, verse 16, we learn that the second messenger arrived and reported that the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. "I alone am escaped to tell you," the second messenger said. And Job chapter 1, verses 17, said that while the second messenger was still speaking, another came in and said the Chaldeans formed 3 columns and made a raid on the camels and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. "I alone am escaped to tell you." And in Job chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, we learn that while the third messenger was speaking, a fourth came in and said, "Your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine when suddenly a great wind came across the desert, struck the four corners of the house, and it fell upon them. I alone am escaped to tell you," the fourth and final messenger said. All of these become, "I alone am returned to tell thee," in the James Taylor song that I've been listening to this week. Needless to say, this day was not a good day for Job. It was a terrible day, yet not long after hearing this news, immediately after, in fact, we see Job's resilience, his response to this tragedy. It is written that Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. So very humble was his heart. Humility surrenders before the heavens and becomes resilience, even in the face of midnight raging disco parties. The soft and broken parts of us sometimes become our greatest strength. 3 days ago and 3 nights, I slept on the soft pillow of my sorrow, and in my dream, I could not let the good light in. I was in darkness, closed off, sealed up, stowed tightly away. Joy was nearby, but it eluded me, tightly grasping. Desperately grasping, I could not hold on to it, so I let it go upon its way. In humility, I surrendered, breathing, moving, and becoming healthy. I was unheavy and newly free of grief and sorrow that weighed me down. I was free of sorrow by way of sorrow. The dream was strange to me. Now, as I mentioned, Marion Williamson tells the story of the woman who ran away from sorrow by shopping. The woman said that if I don't go shopping, if I don't distract myself, I may just sit around and cry all day. In response, Marion Williamson said, maybe you need to sit around and cry all day. Williamson said, maybe after having had yourself a good and healthy cry, you may better know how to exorcise your demons, better know how to dislodge and expel them, how to cast them out and drive them away. Right now, by your methods, your demons are only better dressed. Because before us, there are only two approaches that lead to the good way forward, right? Either we bid sorrow farewell, or we welcome it and make good room for it. We sing about bidding sorrow farewell. Kelly Joe Phelps does anyway. In a song called Goodbye to Sorrow, he sings, "In the eyes of the Lord I am redeemed. He has purified my blood and washed me clean. Now I have said goodbye to sorrow as I lay before the cross. His goodness and his mercy saved a child that was lost. In the eyes of the Lord I am redeemed." Goodbye to sorrow. Phelps is Christian identified, which is obvious, and whether or not we connect with his theology, it is clear that his farewell to sorrow is a healthy one. It is not spiteful. He holds no pride, no vengeance. The healthy leave-taking serves him well on the journey of life moving forward. We bid farewell, or we make good room for sorrow. And we sing about making good room. Joni Mitchell does, at any rate, in a song called Don't Interrupt the Sorrow. She sings, "I've got a head full of quandary and a mighty, mighty thirst, 17 glasses of Rhine wine. Milk of the Madonna, clandestine. He won't let up the sorrow. He lies and he cheats. It takes a heart like Mary's these days when your man gets weak. don't interrupt the sorrow. Mitchell is Christian identified, less emphatically. But the Mary that she refers to is the mother of Jesus, and whether or not we connect with her theology, it is clear that her making room for sorrow is a healthy making room. It isn't spiteful. She holds no pride, no vengeance. The healthy embrace serves her well on the journey of life moving forward. And the sorrow is a guide, is a teacher, is a set of hazard lights, is a warning sign. The deceitful, unfaithful man in the second example, in Mitchell's example, delivers sorrow that strengthens Mary and guides her feet on the good way forward if, and only if, Mary is paying close attention. Sorrow can be a good teacher. It isn't always, but sometimes it really can be. Sometimes sorrow is only sorrow. But other times, and when we're ready, sorrow can lead to resilience. It can help us sneak back into heaven after we've drifted away. So, paradoxically, it's so paradoxical when you think about it sometimes, the heavy things that hold us down can be the means by which we rise. When Job said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there," he was not spiteful in any way. He held no pride, no vengeance, but was fully present to life, even as sorrows compounded by the moment and followed hard upon themselves. Life is like that sometimes. We've seen that so much this year. We are met with waves of suffering. How shall we recover from these waves? How shall we draw upon life to find resilience, to rise back up when we fall down, to spring back? By finding courage enough, by finding humility enough to turn our seaworthy vessels that carry us through life into the raging waves. Bless you. If you have ever sailed through the storms on the sea, you know this to be true. When we choose to turn our vessels that carry us into the waves of life, in other words, when we face our challenges directly with love and faithfulness, with grace and openness, we are safer than we would be otherwise. We are safer than we would be if in pride and in fear we turned away. Baldwin said it beautifully. He said, "If you are afraid of something, soften your belly and turn toward it." Soften your belly and turn toward it. It is so important not to turn away. 3 days ago and three nights, I could not lift my head from sorrow, but sorrow only led me to a stronger and higher place. I was sad because my mom's been in the hospital. And she was in a rehab unit for 3 weeks, but she's out now. It was a hard and sorrowful place, but I am the better for it. And I did not do this alone. I had the help of many good and loving souls along the way. And I truly needed them, one and all. They were all there for me physically, spiritually, passionately, lovingly, honestly. Now, I have the New Grove Press version of the books of the Bible. And in the introduction to the book of Job, Charles Frazier tells an interesting story. He says, "A number of years ago, I read an account about black elk." Do you know who black elk is? The Native American wisdom teacher. The old Sioux visionary, the Oglala Sioux visionary, who was a friend of Crazy Horse. Black Elk lived to see catastrophes to his people, at least the like of Job. They lost as close to everything as you can and not just be extinct. He lived on past his particular apocalypse to be another exile in the 20th century, a frozen man. In telling his story, he dwells in great detail on a time in his earlier life when he became consumed with fear, afraid of being afraid. He then had a powerful vision. that featured 4 quarters of the earth, the weathers of the sky, the animals, and man. In other words, the vision featured all of creation. The great lesson of his all-encompassing vision was the conviction that we should not fear the universe. I always appreciate humble stories about fearlessness. Black Elk Speaks is a lovely book. It's the one that Charles Frazier was talking about. It is a collaborative effort between John Neihert and Black Elk that was first published back in 1932. Neihert pursued Black Elk, who was understandably resistant. Black Elk Speaks, which is their distinctively collaborative effort. It begins as follows. Black Elk says, "My friend, I'm going to tell you the story of my life, as you wish. And if it were only the story of my life, I wouldn't tell it. For what is one man that he should make much of his winters, even when they bend him like a heavy snow? So many others have lived and shall live that story, as to be grass upon the hills. It is the story of all life and all that is holy that is the good story to tell. And the story of us two-leggeds, you and me, sharing it with the 4-leggeds and the wings of the air and all green things, for these are the children of one mother." Black Elk speaks and reminds me of the book of Job. After receiving the calamitous news, after tearing his robe and shaving his head, after falling on the ground and worshiping, Job said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. What mother is this? What is the nature of this mother's womb to which Job truly believed he could return? Who is the mother for any of us, for all of us, if she is not Mother Earth, the sacred feminine who is right now softly breathing beneath our feet? Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Job says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there." And Black Elk says, "All living things are children of one mother." There is a way in which the book of Job and Black Elk Speaks flow into one another and through one another, falling like playful otters on themselves, flowing together like falling waters. There is a way in which Job and Black Elk converge like rivers of water, like rivers of time, and become inseparable, wedded, soul-bound, and spiritually indivisible, even as they are forcibly divorced from one another by the habits of our cultural artifice and the negligence of our own forgetting. Without even knowing it, we stray from the garden and we become shattered from ourselves. Sometimes we fracture from one another, but we are all so much stronger than this if we listen to the wind and if we remember, for the answers, my friends, are still blowing in it. If we bend to it, if we bend our ear, bend our spirit. If we yield to the wind, humbly of course, if we surrender to it, we can hear these answers clearly, no longer stuck, no longer frozen. We can sneak back into the promised land, and if it doesn't work out the first time, we can try again, attempt number 2. This is how we break into the garden. And maybe we won't do this. I don't know. Maybe we'll allow ourselves to become like William James McPhee, the Frozen Man, helplessly tossed about by the raging seas of life. Or maybe we will thaw into life's blessings, great and small, for there are flowers and there is friendship. And there are galaxies and there is starlight. Don't be afraid of the universe. James Taylor concludes the song by singing, "I know what it means to freeze to death, to lose a little life in every breath, to say goodbye to life on earth and come around again To say goodbye and come around again, herein lay the beauty of the song, its great resilience. The Frozen Man is a story about a ship that was lost at sea. All were lost except for the one who sang. I alone am returned to tell thee, hidden in ice for a century to walk the world again. Have you ever felt like this? This is a story of the man who was lost at sea and tossed by the waves of life, who was frozen in time and in place. Have you ever felt like this? I have. I did 3 days ago, and 3 nights. I could not lift my head from the pillow of my sorrow, and there I slept. And in my dream, I was frozen in darkness. Light slipped away through my fingers. I tried to grasp it, but it was like water, like wishes, like the white-tailed deer, nearly impossible to catch. But then, in my dream, when I let go, the joyful light returned to me, guided me back into the garden. When you find yourself feeling frozen inside and tossed by the turning sea, turn the vessel that carries you into the coming waves. Reach out to one another for the help that you need, but don't grasp and don't be afraid. We are more connected than we realize. And after some time adrift or lost or stuck or somehow frozen, there is a thaw. There is a coming home again, just a slight bit better for our travels. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.